Welcome back, folks. My name's Shane. On my last video, I was talking about potentially buying another Panasonic LUMIX GH5 II. That's right, a micro 4/3 camera coming into 2024 in about a month's time as of shooting this. So this particular camera's been out for a few years, and I picked one of these up right after release, or as soon as I could here in Australia. I then broke the selfie screen off by accident, had it repaired, and then ended up trading it in for a Panasonic S5 II to complete a multi-camera setup. Now, I'm not going to tell you that this is a better camera than the S5 II, but it represents excellent value, coming in at 1,600 Australian dollars with a free lens. This is the 9mm f1.7 Leica lens. This is a really great 18mm equivalent lens that gives you just an ultra-wide field of view. It's great for video, great for photography, and if you're looking for excellent minimum focus, this is a really great lens. So for that price, I could justify it, because in Australia at least, the retail price on these lenses is somewhere around $900, which is insane. So for it to get all of this for $1,670 or something like that, I thought it was a really great deal. This video is not sponsored. If you want to check out the same deal on B&H or DigiDirect where I bought this, I'll leave links down in the description and you can check it out. So if you haven't guessed already, you're already looking at this camera right now. So this is my S5 II and this is my GH5 II. So how do they compare? I tried to white balance them the best that I could. I'm leaving everything straight out of camera as it is, and I'm using autofocus as I just showed you before. So if I cover up my face here, I've got the sensitivity set pretty low so it doesn't move around too much, and it's not going to work. So this is one of the trade-offs of the GH5 II. We get contrast DFD, which kind of works. It's working great now, and if I move back, it's going to look good. If I move forward, it's also going to look good, but it doesn't always work when you want to do stuff like this, especially with a black object. This is one of the weird limitations of the camera system, so there it goes. Now, I've got the sensitivity to -3, which means it's locked on. I don't want it jittering or pulsing, and I'm not going to be doing any product showcase with these particular settings on this particular camera other than what I just showed you. So the biggest limitation of this camera, of course, is the autofocus when you compare it up against the G9 II. But I think this represents excellent value, and if you're in a situation where you want to start a YouTube channel, you want great audio, you want the XLR adapter or a shotgun mic going into it, a wireless pack, whatever the case may be, this camera is more than enough to get you going. I started another channel on YouTube that's got over 200,000 subscribers now on micro 4/3, actually with camcorders back in the day, but then when I got over to micro 4/3, it really upped my game, and then I started to notice that full frame was giving me a better look here in the studio, but when I'm outside or if I don't want a camera that I have to worry about as much, micro 4/3 gives me the advantage there. It still gives you excellent IBIS, excellent image quality, plenty of codecs, and just great straight out of camera colors, which is one of the things I love about the LUMIX line. Now, this is the natural picture profile that I've customized on both of my cameras, and I think they look pretty similar. I think there's a little bit more red in my face on the GH5 II over the S5 II, but I could absolutely dial these in and change the hue and all that kind of stuff. But I just wanted to white balance them the same in this room, and different lenses will also give you different white balance results. So just keep that in mind. If you're using a 9mm, you switch to a 25, it's a different lens altogether, you're going to get different white balance results. But I just thought I'd show you the difference between full frame here in the studio and micro 4/3. At the time of filming, I've got the latest firmware on my S5 II and on the GH5 II. So this is version 1.3, which has improved the Cine D picture profile a little bit since at least I owned it, and it also gives you more compatibility with some gimbals or something like that. I saw some DJI stuff mentioned. It might have been something else, but basically I just thought I'd give you a quick comparison between full frame in the studio and micro 4/3. So this lens, I'm using the 35mm as my primary lens on the S5 II, the S Series Prime, and this is the 10 to 25mm f1.7 zoom lens, which is a beast. Now, I could, of course, just use this little guy, this little 25mm f1.7 prime lens on the GH5 II, but the problem with this lens is the autofocus kind of sucks in combination with contrast DFD. Now, if you've got a G9 II, this lens really performs well. We'll talk more about that coming up a little bit later on, but basically, the autofocus performance with this lens is much better with contrast DFD, and it's reliable. I don't think you're going to notice any type of pulsing or whatever in the background. Now, I've got two reference monitors right behind this camera right here, and to my eye, they both look like they're doing a really great job. Now let's talk about value for money. So when this camera first came out, I purchased it for around 2,300 Australian dollars without a lens. It was just the camera body, and I thought I was getting a really great deal. So again, 1,600 bucks for this camera here in Australia, body only, but you get a free lens, this 9mm f1.7, which is a $1,000 lens almost here in Australia. So this is a really great deal. I couldn't pass it up because I really enjoy shooting micro four thirds. All right, so this is the GH6. This was the successor to the GH5 and the GH5 Mark II. This was almost the perfect camera, except one, it's kind of big and heavy, and two, it still had contrast DFD, but the contrast DFD autofocus on the GH6 is fantastic. When it comes to DFD, man, it works so well, especially with some of the more recent Panasonic lenses. Now, like most DFD systems, you're at the mercy of how you're using the camera, what lens you're using, all that kind of stuff. Whereas phase detection autofocus just works way better, right? So if you want that experience in micro four thirds, you'll need to get the G9 Mark II. But just out of the GH6 and the GH5 Mark II, the GH6 has better autofocus and it's noticeably better. Secondly, as Rhett Thompson recently mentioned on one of his videos, the color science out of the GH6 is quite a lot nicer without having to do any tweaks. It almost reminds me of the Sony FX3. You simply white balance that camera and the colors look great if you're using the no picture profile, whatever the case may be. This is very similar, so I could get over to the natural, portrait, or standard picture profile, vlog, whatever the case may be, and I just simply drop it into the timeline and it's going to look great. Whereas I had to kind of customize the natural picture profile a little bit more on the GH5 Mark II, but it's definitely not a deal breaker and you can customize these to no end. So the great news is the color science on the GH5 Mark II is still good, but the GH6 is that little bit better. Now let's talk about some of the reasons why you might want a GH5 Mark II, the first of which is affordability. You know, you can buy 2 or 3 of the GH5 Mark IIs for the price of one G9 Mark II in certain countries, right? Depending on the deal you get and all that kind of stuff. So there's that. Secondly, the GH5 Mark II is a lot lighter and smaller than the GH6, so it's a better travel camera, and once you start pairing it with small lenses like this, it feels like it belongs on that camera body over a big, heavy, clunky camera body like this, which I still love using, but not the most portable camera body when you're talking about micro four thirds. Next, the battery life on the GH5 Mark II is great, and we still get those terminals on the bottom, so if you plan on using a battery grip, you can do so and you can be out shooting all day, which is a really cool thing. At the end of the day, while I find it easier to use a camera like the S5 Mark II to get the kind of look that I'm going for, I can still replicate that look on the GH5 Mark II and get a look that I could absolutely use as an A or B camera. Just know you got to work within any camera's limitations, whether that's the autofocus, the IBIS, the battery life, the overheating, whatever the case may be. But value for money, the GH5 Mark II still makes a whole lot of sense, even going into 2024. Thanks for watching. Catch you soon. Let us know what you think of the S5 Mark II and the GH5 Mark II and how they compare in the studio here. Thanks again. See ya.